Hello everyone and welcome to our show today. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. We're grateful for all the comments that you've sent us regarding the show. We're also very pleased to know that our information is valuable to you and that it is helping to change lives and help you to live to your fullest potential. We always invite you to share the show with others who may also want to change their lives as well. In an interview with Terry Gross, Mari Sindak, author of Where the Wild Things Are, reflected on getting old and dying. And one of the things that he said in the interview is that saying goodbye to loved ones is often very, very painful, and he missed those who had gone on before him. But he said three words that were really, really, really powerful in that message. Live your life, live your life. Those were his words as he knew that he would be dying someday soon. And I want to invite you today to think about how you are living your life. All too often we rush around from one task to the other. We're on technology day in, day out, and sometimes we're on multiple technology devices at one time. We are not focused on what's going on in our lives, what's going on in our families' lives. And so today I want to ask that you will stop, pause, think about what you're doing. Think about what you are doing in the moment. I know some of you, even as you're watching this show, you're multitasking. You're doing several things while you're listening to us. But I want to invite you just to sit, to think, to experience, to be in the moment. Today I'm joined by my co-host Susan Bainbridge, but I'm also joined by Paula Jean Burns. Paula Jean Burns is the queen of the HeartVoice connection. She teaches professionals how to go from living and leading on autopilot, which most of us do, to living and leading through inspired purpose and passion. Don't you want to enjoy what you do? Part of what we do at Sacred Intelligence is teaching you about living your passion, but Paula Jean Burns works with you as a professional to help you live life all in. So we're really excited to have her with us today. She has a program called Bespoke and another program within Bespoke called Emerge, but she can do a much better job of explaining what it's all about, and I want to invite her to do so. But I want to invite you today for this moment to tune in to the show, being very mindful of how you can change your life. Paula, welcome to the show today. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with both of you.
Thank you. And Susan, as always, of course, welcome to the show. Paula, one of the things that we do when we start out our show, we start out by asking those who are on the show to tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got to this place of where you recognize that you were on autopilot and how important it is to live our lives all in.
Yeah, and so it is. My journey really probably started about 5 or 6 years ago. I was living a life that I thought was very successful at the time, or by anyone else's standards looking at me would feel it was very successful. I had a tremendous corporate career in the IT world within healthcare. I was married, 3 beautiful children, our home. Everybody was in their groove doing their things, but I considered myself, now looking back, I really was a professional plate spinner. So you know the plate spinner who has the pole with the plate and you start plate 1, it's going, plate 2 starts, you go back to 1, you start 3 and you go back to 1 and 2. That's what my life was like. And it started very early on, trying to be sort of the good girl, the people pleaser. Growing up, when I got married, I didn't even write my own vows because I was so concerned about what everyone was going to think and what the right words were that I kind of tossed that off. And then I managed a wonderful team of individuals in the corporate environment for years and had great outcomes and great success, but I was really interested in what they were doing, what their needs were. On the home front, how do you manage the home front with kids and families and people moving? Sure. So I created a binder. Yeah. I had a system. I had a spreadsheet for everybody's activities, what they needed, up to and including the holidays. My Christmas list was on an Excel spreadsheet with when I needed to shop, when I needed to set the table.
I have to tell you, you're like making me anxious here when you're talking about that. I am so far from that, but you're super organized.
I was highly organized. It was a way for me to control and manage all the dynamics in my life.
Yes,
so
avoiding chaos.
Antithesis of that was when I did carve out those times for me, my time, go to dinner with girlfriends, sit down and look at the menu. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a moment where nobody is needing my time, that I didn't know what to do with that. So I would just like, oh, I'll have what you're having. I'll have what you're having. I never had my own voice. I didn't take the time to think about what my needs were and what I needed. So I had all of this dynamic going on, and the catalyst to stopping really came at a very pivotal time 5 years ago.
So before you tell us that, because I do want to hear
Sure.
about that, but you started by saying, I thought that I was successful. That was the definition. And I can imagine that there are people looking at this show right now who would say, I would love to have that.
Yeah.
I would love to have the successful marriage, the children, the successful career. And with that comes this belief that happiness will come. So if you had to look at your life, I know I'm putting you on the spot now, but with all of that going on around you, did you feel that like this is happiness, this is it? Before you got to that catalyst point, did you feel like this is?
So I did. I felt snippets of joy for sure. I mean, you cherish your children. I have a wonderful husband in marriage. I have family that's close knit. So yes, I was experiencing happiness in my life. What was lacking, and I know that now, was a sense of significance.
Yes.
So in success and in our world today, you look at that picture, and then you also define success as, well, it's either a title, power, position, or money.
Yeah.
And they're never in line. I have a great title, but I wish I made more money. I'm making good money, but I really wish I was the director, CI, something or other. They're not together. What's missing in that paradigm is significance. That significance of self, of purpose, of self-worth. And that was the piece that I was unaware of.
Yes.
It felt like a gnawing, felt unsettled, but I didn't know what it was.
And so what's really interesting, and I know I can't wait to hear you talk about that pivotal point in your life, but that gnawing we often refer to in the work that we do is really the sacred speaking to you, saying something's not right here. I'm calling you to a significant
And it
purpose.
will keep
Yeah.
speaking and speaking until you start listening. Yeah,
True.
absolutely.
And we're very much conditioned to not go to that place for guidance and decision making. It's really up here, or at least that was my experience. I was very in my head. So coming from the background that I did, trying to keep things organized, it was project plans, timelines, task lists. That was the world I came from. So that was what I knew to rely back on for decision making, for managing. Didn't know what that felt like, just that it was an unsettled belly.
So then tell us about your experience that rocked your life as you
Yeah,
described.
it was a rocking, and actually there were two, and I'll share both of them. So the first one came 5 years ago. My parents retired, moved down to Florida. Their forever home, living their someday dream. And within 3 months, my dad passed from cancer. And so it was very sudden and far too early in his life. They were very young. And at the funeral service, at the wake for his service, my sisters and I and family are standing together. We're a very tight-knit family and leaning on each other for support and guidance. And a message came through to me while I was standing there, and everyone was passing by us and sharing their wishes with us. And that message was, to me, you can measure the impact that a person has had on others by the length of their line. I was like, a lot of emotion going on at that time. Like, length of their line? What line? What does this message mean? And the length of their line is the length of their line at their funeral. See, in today's very busy world of over-connectedness and lots of stimulation and quick texting, and it's easier to send something than show up, my dad had a huge line, and not because there were lots of people, but the people that were there were heartfelt connections, people that he had reached out and touched in some way, shape, or form. The person that was, down and out, and he would go and meet them on the street and shake his hand and give him $50 and say, do what you need to do with this. Kids that didn't have dads, that he would show up to football games going, well done, we're here for you. That was the connectedness.
And that's what I really love in terms of hearing your story about this, because two things stand out for me. One, that even in the midst of all that was going on, you were in tune with the sacred, because the sacred used that moment to say, Paula, this is it. This is your next step. Speaking to you in that really crucial moment where you could hear, it's amazing. But the second thing that I hear you saying, we talk about shared relationships. Your father, even in dying, I mean, I did my father's eulogy, and I talked about I learned more about my father in his dying than it seemed like I learned in his living. And he had taught me many things, but in that moment, your father was still connected to you, still teaching. And look at all those people who were connected with him, and now they're connected with you. And so that really talks about our shared relationships, and gave you this wonderful work that you're doing now with professionals. So you got to thank Dad and thank the sacred for both of those things.
Always, and I'll share that in just a minute. Absolutely. And I kind of, when I realized this was happening, and then a couple of days later, I'm like, did you hear that message to my sisters? Did you get that? And like, no. And I knew it was divinely channeled to me. I knew at that moment that what I was determining as a successful life and how I was plate spinning was not how I should be living, and that there was greater purpose. I just didn't know what it was. So now it's my job to figure it out. So I let that settle with me for a few days. Was in my corporate office, heading off to a meeting late with my cell phone in hand and my laptop and all the things that you grab with you when you're multitasking. And I got to the doorway and I was just like, oh my God, that's it. I need to grow my line. I don't have a line. See, as the plate spinner of my life, I was skimming the surface. I wasn't getting invested in making those deep, rich, meaningful connections. And I knew right then and there, number one, I craved a line. I wanted to feel that. And the second thing I realized was all the eggs were put in the basket for someday. When we retire, we'll do someday. We'll do someday. And I realized right then and there that there is no someday. That's false. Someday is nowday. It's today. So I needed to take action today.
Because your father someday was going to go to Florida and retire, and then he only had 3 months after that. So that was crucial too.
Right.
Yeah.
So I need to ask, because this is a huge issue, I think, with people we work with, and almost universal, I would say. So it was left to you to figure out, okay, so what is that purpose? How'd you figure it out?
It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy because I didn't really have a framework to go by. So I knew that I was unsettled. I knew what I was doing didn't feel right, but I didn't pay attention to it right away. But the thought of, I got to grow a line. So I started reaching out more, spending more time with friends, people that I thought, wow, I think I have something in common with that person. I like the way he or she relates. And so I started reaching out. And in that reaching out, I met a wonderful gal who's a dear friend of ours. And she invited me over for a happy hour for Girls' Night Out. And at Girls' Night Out, we're standing around the island in her home, and she had bright, engaging women there that I didn't know. So she said, let's go around and introduce everybody. And we started with the person to my left and went all the way around so that I was last. And by the third person into this introduction, I panicked. Because what I was hearing was these women saying, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I've created a program, I have my own company. All these wonderful accolades of their life, and I didn't have that. I was defining myself and my life by, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I wasn't able to separate and see that divine essence within me, to see the gifts and value that I brought. So I panicked, I freaked, and I wanted to get out of there so bad, but I couldn't. So when it was my turn, I said, I don't know who I am at this moment, but I do know I'm on a path, a multidimensional path, spiritually, emotionally, professionally, on all fronts. and I began reaching out to others, doing a lot of reading, personal development, taking course. I got a business mentor and a coach, and that helped me to start to unravel this experience that I was creating and be able to pull in from childhood, past businesses and work that I had done that I didn't see the talent in, but we henpecked. Well, you're good at this, and you're good at this, and you are a teacher, and you do speak well, and you do relate to people, and out of that birthed my zone of brilliance, which is in reaching out, coaching, teaching, speaking, authoring.
So Paula, I just want to say before you get into that part, because I know that there are the people out there who are listening who are the moms who are doing the successful careers, and they're saying, so what's wrong with that? Why can't I do this? You know, because the hardest part of all of our jobs is to teach people to do what they're passionate about, because they'll say, well, that's easy for you to say, but I have responsibilities. I have this that I have to take care of. You know, excuses, or reasons, beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? Because for some people they are excuses because they could go ahead and take the next step. But I do want to say I honor those women for where they are. I think that's the first thing that's very clear. I honor those women who've chosen to stay at home and to raise their kids, and those women who've chosen to still be in the career world, because we do need people in all aspects of our lives. But I think one of the things that we are saying that's really, really crucial is not to lose yourself. Never, ever, ever lose yourself, whatever you define yourself as. So if you are choosing to stay home with your kids, stay home with your kids and raise them, but who are you? Let the best of who you are come out. And I think that that's the thing that we talk about when we say, what are you passionate about? How are you living your life? And so when you heard all of those women talk about all the things that they were doing, you know, I heard you say, boy, I'm wondering what is it that I do, because they're all doing these amazing things. You were doing amazing things too. And I do want to make sure that I point that out and honor it. But you were just saying at that stage in your life, something shook you. You know, something woke you up and said it's time. And I think that people grow to a place where it's their time, because I imagine in your work, just like in our work, you can talk to people all you want to about it's your time to move forward, and if they're not ready, if that sacred part hasn't spoken to them, they're just kind of
on autopilot.
On autopilot. So
Yeah.
So for you then, you worked really hard. You did all the work that you needed to do to find your passion and move forward.
Yeah, it was, I asked everybody, what's my special purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? I was so disconnected from self and my divine essence that I didn't know what it would be, what it could look like, what to explore. So I just became a sponge. I wanted to read, and it was like a survival. I wanted to read and engage and hear and participate to awaken myself.
Can I ask a question? How much time did you spend in silence?
Quite a bit. Okay. So a part of my journey has also been the adoption of a very strong meditative practice. And I meditate twice a day, and that has been monumental in my shift and moving forward, giving me that sense of grounding and sense of peace where I could listen and just be with who I am.
And do you find that the more you stay in that meditative state, the more you carve out that time to be in that state and to have your sacred balance, that it helps everything else you're going through in life, just you can bear it a little bit better because you've grounded yourself, as opposed to just running out the door doing all these 50 million things without that grounding.
Absolutely. It's the foundation. You'll ask my kids, well, what was mom like before she meditated, and what's mom like now? And the reactionary me, it no longer exists. It's more a pause, step back, look at the situation, what's the lesson in life to be learned here? And there's clinical trials and studies coming out daily about the effects of a good meditative practice. For clarity, connection to self, spirit, and other, for clarity of vision and where you want to go, for creativity. And those are all attributes and aspects that as mindful leaders, and mind you, we're all leaders in one way or another, leaders of our own lives, absolutely, but we may lead families, we may lead others, we may be in a corporate career or business and lead teams. You have to embrace those tenets, if you will, to be what I consider happy, healthy, and whole. We've sort of stripped away in life the connection piece and the creativity piece, and just being still. It needs to come back in.
Well, and I think it certainly needs to come back in, even if we go back to being a mom. You need to practice some mindfulness. You need to, because for one thing, it helps you with restraint. Like you were just saying, you weren't the reactionary person, but when you are grounded, you can take a step back and say, okay, they're a teenager right now. I know they're really not conscious of what they're saying, and cognitively, they're only able to go to a certain point. But if not, you are responding. And I'm just using teenagers as an example. I have two wonderful teenagers. I don't want to belittle teenagers, but we know that sometimes when you're in certain places cognitively, the thinking is very different. As parents, we can react to that if we are not in a state of calmness.
Right. So this is a great visual. So think about pausing and mindfulness. What is mindfulness? How do I understand it? Mindfulness occurs between an event, something you heard, something you see, something you experience, and reaction. And that gap between the two, sometimes it's very teeny, like you're in the middle of a road and a bus is coming, you don't have time to react, you get out. Versus I've experienced something that someone has said to me, I can make that gap wider. And when you open that gap and you just are present and you just be with the issue, the situation, it allows the brain to just relax and get out of that fight or flight mode, which usually when we react, we come back with, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. So it's finding the gap in situations that is most helpful.
So tell us then how you got to mindfulness and how you use it in your practice now.
Sure. So once I kind of realized that there was something else that I needed to be doing, there was a greater calling for me and I needed to discover what it was, I did a lot of personal development, a lot of reading. Along that journey, I also continued to have the gnaw in my belly, like I was not in the right place. So for me, it was a drastic move. I had to remove myself from my corporate world, so I actually resigned from my position. A very drastic thing, but for me, that was what I needed to do to find the space and just get out of that energy that I was so attuned to. And that gave me the bandwidth to do a lot of digging and a lot of investigating of who I was and what was important to me. And out of that came the birth of my company, Bespoke, which is all about the definition of bespoke, which I think is so fun. Refers to an English tailor that makes custom suits designed just for you. They don't fit anybody else. In current day definition, bespoke refers to custom programs that are written for companies, coding programs that are used just internally. They're not to be used externally. And that's the work that we do. It's about the inside job, the inside work. So Bespoke was born, its signature program was created called Emerge, which really focuses on the 5 facets that need to be in place for you to be in your zone of brilliance and leading very authentically and leading a happy, healthy, and whole life.
So what are they?
So there's 5 facets. There is capital. So we need to build capital, but it's not the monetary kind of capital. Capital refers to personal equity, what you build to yourself. You need to invest in yourself to grow. The airlines has it right. When you get on the plane, you put your mask if the pressure drops before you put it on your child. You need to be your best self before you can serve others in the best way. So building personal equity, honoring yourself, taking your emotional pulse. How do I feel about a situation, a place, an event? And don't just default and go with it. Don't do like I did and said, I'll have what she's having. You're ordering Pinot Grigio or a dinner I don't care for. But instead of speaking up and thinking and taking the time, you default. You're living on autopilot. Intuitive, tapping into your intuition.
So I want to just pause you for a second, because I think that part of the reason people live on the autopilot, I think, are two reasons. One, you said, I didn't want to have to think about, when I went out. But also this sense of not being secure enough in who you are, that I must order what she's having, because if I don't order it, then maybe that speaks to something about me. So I think it really, your equity position that you take really covers a wealth of things in terms of how we feel about ourselves, particularly as ladies. I think there's always some form of competition, not feeling good about yourself. And so I think when you speak of that, it's really rather deep.
It is deep. It gets to the core of your self-worth.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. So now the other ones.
And the fourth, intuition. So, leading your life not just from your ego and your head perspective of what's logical and what I've been conditioned to, but it's listening to that voice. And when I finally listened to my intuitive, my authentic self voice, I needed to make that drastic change. And as soon as I did, my bellyache went away. I was no longer conflicted. I just waited way too long to realize that I had another voice that was guiding me. And then
your fifth one.
Yeah, assessment. So to sort of kind of figure discovery. It's sifting and sorting your way through life. What serves me, what no longer serves me, what serves me, what no longer serves me. When you can bring in those 5 aspects and they come together, you're really operating on your authentic self.
So, Paula, one of the things that you were talking about before the show started, because these areas are critical areas, and we talked about what would it be like to teach our kids these things. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that you and Susan were really talking a bit about that beforehand. And what we're saying is, if we can teach children about these things as they're growing up and as they're going through school, they would end up being much better leaders in the future. What do you think about that?
I have very strong and passionate feelings about that, because we're actually correcting or addressing and fixing a problem at an end stage instead of addressing it and recognizing that we could prevent it by doing things differently. So certainly structure and boundaries and all the hard skills that we learn as young people are very important. But what we probably haven't focused on, equally as important, is the softer, the more mindfulness, that state of being. Are you anxious? Are you secure? Are you creative? It's that state of being, not really a skill you can teach, it's sort of intrinsic, but when you mask it, it really is a problem. And bringing that forward, so what would the dynamic be like? What would a school look like? What would an office look like if we were embracing mindfulness as a way of living and leading in all aspects of our lives?
And I know that there are some schools who actually integrate mindfulness
Yes, they
into
do.
their day, and I think it's really, really wonderful. There are schools who also offer yogurt, maybe I'm hungry. Yoga as well, but I think it's so important, particularly for us as women, to model these things for our children. But I know that there are people who will poo-poo it, and there are men especially who will say, because they think a little bit differently than we do, what is all this mindfulness business? And so what are some of the ways in your business, because I know that you work with professionals, and trying to get them to tap into this way of thinking in order to be better leaders, how do you work with your leaders, and how do you find it working with men? Are there different strategies that you use when you're working with men to teach them as well?
Sure. So everyone comes to the table with their own preconceived idea of a situation or an event. You also come with the baggage, and that's the baggage of your life, how I show up. So it's going to take, it's an overtime kind of thing. It's a journey. So how men and women adapt to this concept that, the skill sets that you've learned that have gotten you to where you are, and they're awesome, and you've done a great job. For the 21st century leader, and that's who you want to be, because you're telling me you're showing up disconnected, constrained, on autopilot, not feeling that sense of significance. That's how my clients show up to me. and I can show you that there's a better way to look at this, that's the transition and that's the shift. So I've kind of put it together in a package that I think people relate to, and we relate to acronyms really well.
Right.
We like to condense everything down to LOL, just a soundbite. But I teach CPR. And for me, CPR is a life-saving tool. But it's a different kind of CPR. So the C stands for you need to have connection, clarity, and creativity. And for us, connection needs to be to self. Who am I? What do I like? That voice. So it's connection to self, spirit, that other guiding force in your life, whatever it may be that you can look to say, I'm not sure I'm taking this on so well. Like I need support and I need guidance. And then to others. It's no longer good enough just to kind of skim through life and skim by, as I was doing, and make those surface relationships. Nothing really comes out of it substantive that you can take with you. So it's creating the connection, clarity, and creativity, and that centeredness. Be present. We do a great job of multitasking as people nowadays, especially with technology. I can be on the cell phone, I can be typing, I can have the TV on, my kids are plugged in. We're not related.
Well, we think that we're doing a great
connecting.
job. We actually are not doing a great job.
It's
And they've done the
clinical
research to
studies
show
will
that
show
we're
you
not.
that you
multitasking.
you can multitask, but your brain doesn't do that so well, and it will inherently put something else on a little bit of a back burner. Not 100% focused, but I'm hearing you.
And actually, the productivity is not
It's
as
not.
great as you think that it is as well.
You're not as
And-
productive.
and
You
it's one-
tend to make mistakes. You're not as clear. Your creativity goes way down. You're just trying to get through
Exactly.
something.
And we try to teach kids that, if you're listening to music or you're watching TV while you're doing your homework, that's a simple, example. You're not as focused as you need to be. So yes, maybe you'll get, especially if they get A's, they'll say, well, I'm getting an A. Yeah, but look at the brilliance you could have if you weren't doing that. It's really crucial,
Right. Yep.
So the other parts, though.
So that's the C part of CPR. So the P part is to be present. You need to be present. It's that whole multitasking thing. Look and focus. Listen to receive, not to formulate your response. What I want to tell you, that's not really engaged conversation. And it's hard to do. And I'm still practicing it. But to listen to receive and let that resonate and then formulate your response. Be present. The second one is to pause. We talked about that little bit of pausing, that gap between what happened to you, what you heard, saw, felt, and how you're going to respond to it. And there's visceral cues. Did you kind of stiffen up? That might be a cue to you that, does this resonate with me? Do I like this? Do your hairs get bristly? Do you immediately have that response? You want to take it back, breathe, take a step back, remove yourself from the situation. Whether it's with your kids, whether, that's not great behavior, I need to take a time out and just step away from this and we'll come back and we'll have a conversation. So you're not reactionary. Because we're trying to do so much with so little resources, whether it's at home or whether it's in a business corporate space, more with less. Taking that pause and stepping back. And then the last P is to participate, authentically whole, engaged. And then the R for CPR is take a risk, but I've defined risk a little bit different. Risk is really to release those old beliefs and things that no longer serve you. Why do we carry the baggage with us?
Sure.
It doesn't serve me, it's okay to let it go. A belief is just something thought over and over and over again. So guess what? You can create a new one right now. Think of a new perspective, a new thought, and retrain and rethink that. And then it becomes a belief because it's true to you. You feel it. So release those things that no longer add value to your life. Invest in yourself. Get that learning. Learning will allow you to grow, and we want to grow as a people, as an individual. You want to thrive. We don't want to be in survival mode. It doesn't feel good.
And what I'm hearing you say with your CPR that you're giving, a lot of these things people are putting into practice in the sense that I'm thinking about my question to you earlier about men. How do you translate this to them? But going back to your C, for instance, we're talking about the connectedness with self and others and spirit. And when you're training them to be able to get them to see, maybe you're doing this in some way, because some of these people already have spiritual practices.
Right.
And so it's really not just something that you need to poo-poo. You need to sit and listen to me because I'm telling you how to put all the pieces together and really to help you live the way that you think and believe that you want to live. Because ideally, if you have a spiritual practice, you really want to live the life in the way that the practice sort of dictates, right? So what you're saying to them is, okay, stop. Take a moment. This is how we're going to put all these three pieces together, and that you're going to walk the walk and talk, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk.
Right.
So I think it's great the way that you've kind of put all these things together here to say this is what you need to do. And what I find also interesting, and I wonder, I know that you go out and you do seminars and workshops with your leaders. I'm thinking that this is a great complement even to the therapeutic work that we do, because once they've come out and they start talking to you about needing to open up all these channels and getting rid of all this baggage, come and see us, because then you really need to do some deep work around getting rid of some of that junk. Right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's there, and maybe some of it's bubbling to the surface. You can see it, feel it, touch it. Others of it, it's not, and you're kind of pushing it below the surface.
But I think that if you are doing a workshop with people and you're bringing these issues up, if they really open themselves up, they can, that little feeling that you said there was before will start gnawing at them.
Right. It's an awakening.
It's an awakening.
It's an awakening. And that's what I'm here to serve and to do, is to really take what was a beautiful gift to me from my dad and my experience, and to share that. Don't wait till you're as old as I am in my journey to figure this out. It's a way of life that we can bring all
But at
the
least
way
you
back.
listen.
I've
figured
got
it
it.
out on this
I've
side,
got
though.
it. I
You
have.
figured it out. And that's
I
what's
have.
really great. And I have to tell you, the other day, my daughter was talking about high school. She's taking a few honors classes, and she said, I was recommended for all honors classes next year. And I said, well, are you going to do it? And she said, yes, I guess. But she will. But she was just talking about how school sometimes can just seem so stupid, because it's like, why do we have to do all this work? We just do all this work. It's mounds and mounds and mounds of work. And so I said to her, well, it's preparation, because when you get out of high school, you're going to go to college, and you're going to have a lot of work to do. And then when you get out of college, you're going to go and you're going to get a job, and you're going to do a career, and it's going to be a lot of work. But I heard myself as I was talking to her and thinking, well, yeah, that's some life. What's it all for, sort of thing. But I'm fortunate, because I live a life doing things that I'm very passionate about. And I've always sort of just kind of followed those things that I'm passionate about. And it's my wish for anyone who's out there doing work, which is all of us. But it's still just the way I was explaining it to her, it sort of hit me, because then it's like, well, then what's it all for?
Yeah.
If you're just living. So I think the hard job that you have and that we have is really teaching people about living your life's purpose and how that's fulfilling. Because you've said this, and I've heard people you and I belong to a business group together, and I've heard many of the women in the group say this: I gave up a successful career in order to have. And that's huge for a lot of people, to really say, I'm going to give this up.
It's a choice. It's a definite choice.
It's a choice.
But for me, it was not an option. I had to pursue this. I didn't know how it was going to unfold. And the lesson in that, which is a beautiful lesson to share with our young people, is that it's a journey. There's no end game. Your end game is when you take your last breath, and then you're looking back to that string of moments, and that string with all the moments is your life, and it's the story of your life. So when you can think of it that way, that you are the producer of your life, you can write your story. Yes, situations come at you, so how do you handle them will reflect an outcome, but you can choose the story, and you can choose to rewrite any chapter that doesn't serve you well. So for me, I had to change my business world, because I wasn't tapping into my innate gifts and talents in a way that I could be most serving and most useful. But we have to look at our life as a story, not as a...
You must have been in my therapy session this morning because I said the exact same thing to my client this morning. I said, you have the power to rewrite.
And I had a beautiful example of that with my son, because you think about milestones. We live in a milestone kind of world. Do this and you get that. Do this and you get that. It's very cause and effect, not so much journey linearly. It's just going to kind of evolve. So when my son was in college getting ready for his junior year for his internship, he came back and said, I don't know what I'm going to do for my internship, but I just love playing the drums, and it's my passion. And I looked at him, I'm like, you're going to a private college and your passion is drums. What are we doing here? Like, this is a very big college tuition to handle if your passion is drums. You need to think about this. And he said, no, it really is. I'm going to follow this. As a parent, I didn't quite see where that was going, and I had some concerns that if your passion is drumming and you're in a business school, you really think you're going to get a drumming career? That's really a difficult position to attain. But he was so convicted in it. And his junior year, he got his internship, and he got an internship with a high-end drumming company, not far from campus. The lesson that came to me, and he subsequently got a full-time job with the company, so the lesson to me was I had a perspective and a paradigm of how I thought that vision, his passion, was going to lay out. What I was hearing is I want to be a professional drummer in a band on a stage. What he was trying to say is I'm passionate about drumming. I don't know how it's going to unfold, but I know that I'm passionate, want to keep it in my world. And as a result, it all came together. He was able to use his business degree in a field of music with a company that produces drums. And it was such a pivotal moment for me. I said, you know what, you have taught me a life lesson that if you do have a passion, don't predispose how it's going to turn out, just go with it.
Well, and I think that's a tough lesson for us as parents, but I read a story just this morning in my meditation, and it was about a person who loved playing the saxophone and loved playing jazz, and it was his passion. But when he came into his spirituality and his beliefs in God, he felt like the saxophone was more of an idol because he gave more time to that than developing his spirituality. But he said once he freed himself of that, once he was committed to practicing his spirituality and his beliefs, he said it was amazing for him how God opened up an opportunity for him to play the saxophone and do what he loved doing and still be connected with God. Mm-hmm. And I think the lesson for all of us is if we rely on the gifts that we have been given, it will unfold for us so that we can live a life that's authentic to us and who we've been designed and created to be. And that's the lesson for us. Our kids need to learn it early. And I also want to make sure that I point out that while I say that many of the women in this group that we belong to, you did it, I did it, we gave up these careers to do what we're passionate in. It wasn't without thought. We did plan, we did some planning, so I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, a lot of thought. So I've packaged this all up in what I think is easy for folks to attach to, which is CPR, because CPR is it's a rescue. How do I do this? How do I survive? And so the last in risk, after you have, you seek to learn, you want to thrive, we don't want to survive. We need to grow, we need to stretch. And in the stretching and getting out of our comfort zone, that's where the change occurs. And it's little steps, it's not the quantum leaps. You don't have to quit your day job like I did to make a change. It can be small corrections. Take a class, get involved in a book club, go back to school and take a course, don't enroll for full time. It's the small steps over time that you're able to look over your shoulder in the rearview mirror and realize, oh my gosh, look at how much has changed. And then keep it simple. Keep it simple. Life is not meant to be difficult. It is meant to be beautiful and simple, but we overcomplicate it.
So, excuse me, and I do apologize for the coughing, but I'm battling a little cold here. But Paula Jean, in your work, you work with professionals, and you work with them in groups, and you also work with them individually. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you begin to work with the organizations? How does one get in touch with you and say, hey, I want you to come in? What would be some clues that they need to have you to come in and to work with them to kind of get their organization, going in a different direction?
Sure. So really connecting with those individuals, directors, vice presidents that are in a position to lead others. And it's really looking at outcomes. Where are you? Where do you want to go? What's your mission? What's your goal? Are you feeling like you are connected to your team? And is your team following you? I mean, the essence of a leader is really based off of a skill set that I can impart knowledge and you will follow. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about leadership, we usually talk about the harder skills. You can plan, you can pull teams together, you can coordinate, you can speak. Those are hard skills you can teach. But the softer skills are the mindfulness leadership skills. And as I said, those are the sort of its state of being. And when you bring those two together, magic happens. Mm-hmm. People feel invested, they feel significant. And you can look to a team and see by their faces and by their energy whether they're invested or not. Mm-hmm. Whether your team is sort of tapped out, you're running on empty. And any manager, director will know, he'll have the pulse and be like, our team is just not thriving. Yeah. That's the team that is my ideal client. Mm-hmm. And coming in, it's like, let's reframe this. What are the things that have been stripped away, that are not there, that makes you the person that needs to be sitting here at this table? And it's not homogeneous. Teams that look to say, I want to have this skill set and everybody on the team needs to have that set of skills is usually a team that's not going to survive long term or be as brilliant as a team that brings multi-dimensional, multifaceted, the quiet person, the extrovert, the creative thinker, because then you're bringing together a team of individuals with their own zone of brilliance that add to you what you want to do.
So when you go in and you do the work with the larger group, you give them some examples of mindfulness, when you're there, and you teach them the structure of the CPR when you go in to meet with them as a group.
Right, so it's workshop based, and again, it depends upon the client. Okay. But it could be a workshop, and it could be a full day intensive, VIP deep dive, or it could be spread out. Yeah. And I employ tools and leading exercises that walk them down that path, so that by the end of our experience together, mm-hmm. they're seeing the full picture of the Emerge program, which is 5 facets of, I want to be the best I can be.
Sure.
What do I need to be aware of and tap into? Sure. And then on my private clients, we'll do a coaching session, and that's structured to meet the needs of that client or the group calls or clients. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry that this is completely off topic, so I've been trying to keep my mouth shut. But one of the things that, going back to the transitional time when you had left your corporate job and you were really searching for, okay, what is next? What am I meant to be doing? And one of the things you said was that you were a sponge, that you were asking people, which I think is huge in terms of being able to articulate to people, okay, what do you see in me? What do you find valuable in me? Because often, I would say, other people see things that we may not give ourselves credit for. So I think that's good as long as it's done that way and not done in terms of, okay, well, I can't find my own purpose, so I'm going to see if somebody else can tell me what to do. Because obviously that's not authentic, just taking the advice of someone else. Well, maybe that's their purpose, but maybe it's not yours. But okay, so I was an English major as an undergrad. So one of the things you said is you did a lot of reading. I would love to know, who are a few of the most influential authors that you came across in your reading, in trying to find others who were fellow seekers, maybe? What authors or what books spoke most to you?
It really was across the board, because I didn't know what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So if someone said a book, I'd write it down. Oh, what was that? Because I would look at them and say, well, you're on your journey in the past, so maybe there was something, a nugget that you found in that book, I need to know about it. So I had a pad of paper and I wrote down all the books, and I'm still working on that list. But some of the ones that stand out that I still carry with me today and refer back to Brene Brown. Her Daring Greatly and Gifts of Imperfection opened and exposed to me the whole concept of vulnerability as a good thing, not a bad thing. And much of what I'm doing is all that inside work, and it's working with people that feel that constraint. I don't know what it is, but I'm afraid to release it. It's being vulnerable and showing up that way. So Brene Brown definitely had a stake in my journey. Robin Sharman wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And that was an amazing book that I read twice. I followed that story closely, and it paralleled much of what I was going through. I read The Secret, and the thought of manifesting your own life. Live the life you want to live, but start living it today. So visualize it, manifest it. And I started playing that way. Okay, I want my life to look this way, so I'm going to think that it is this way. And slowly it became that way.
I hear a process of discernment in there as well, though, because even though you had your list of books that you had to read, you were careful about which books you read and when you read them. Because I think one of the dangers, and I think this is just piggybacking on what you're saying about listening to everybody else about what your purpose is, because other people can tell you what your purpose is, or they think they can. I think that sometimes when we're uncertain of what we've been called to do, we end up falling into these traps of things that, like, well, that's not what I really wanted to do. And other times it could be people speaking something into your existence, like Susan said, that you were not aware of. But I think it's so critical when we read. And first of all, I think it's critical that we read.
Yeah.
But secondly, I think it's critical that when we read, that we are discerning and we take the information that's for us. And it sounds like when you said I wrote down my list of books, and I still have them to read, when I hear the books that you started reading and how they were in sync with one another, you read the books that you needed to read for that time period that were going to propel you forward. I often have people who will read and read and read and read, but will not do the work that they need to do. And you did both, and I think that that's really great, because what it did is that it allows you to now go ahead and to develop the program that you have to work with people. So what I'd like to do, I want to make sure that people know how they can get in touch with you before we run out of time. I know we have just a little bit more time, but how could people get in touch with you if they want to work with you individually and as a group?
Sure. Certainly message me, email me. I'd love to connect and answer any question and be of service to anyone that might have a question or an inquiry. And that's through my email, paulajean@bespoke-yourlife.com.
Okay, that's BESPOKE
-yourlife.com. paulajean@bespokeyourlife.com. Also through my website, which has a bunch of information about me, my journey, and also in this process I wrote a book called 50 Shades of Greatness, The Secret to Living Your Life All In. And it's really a guidepost, and it journeys 52 weeks of year. How funny is that? Because it's 50 plus 2 bonuses. That really can be used on a weekly basis to say, what's a theme or something I want to attach onto this week to take that journey, to take that process, to take that step going forward. So I wrote it in sort of a guidepost way, and that's there. It's a free offering. I hope it serves somebody, and it allows them to begin to question, where am I, what do I enjoy doing, and start that process. So that's on my website, which is www.bespoke-yourlife.com.
Okay. So what we generally do, we usually end the show with some golden rules, but lately, because of time, we've just posted the golden rules on our website, which we will also do this time as well. But I think that we can tell from watching today's show, as with all the other shows, that it is so important for you to have that relationship with the sacred, to be able to tap into your inner being so that you know that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that there's a special purpose for you in life. You need to take time to stop and listen, so that you can find out what your purpose is. And then you need to take time to really examine yourself. Really examine what's important to you Examine what you want. Examine what you were called to do from when you were younger. What were the things that you were really passionate about? Take the time to explore that. But in doing so, also take the time to connect with others. As our guest Paula Jean said today, it was at her father's funeral where she was able to really think about those connections. Look at the people in your life and think about the way that you've connected with them. Look at your parents, look at your friends, look at your coworkers. Do you have a real, authentic connection with them? If not, it's time for you to take stock of that and be more mindful. Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like more information about us, please go to www.sacredintelligence.com. If you'd like to comment on today's show or send us an email, send it to info@sacredintelligence.com. As always, please share our show with others. We are on YouTube with Sacred Intelligence TV. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, be blessed.